Take whatever you can carry and get out. The house belongs to my brother now. You have no claim here. My aunt said that to me 3 hours after we buried my father. I was still wearing the black dress I'd borrowed from my neighbor because I hadn't had time to buy one. I hadn't had time for anything. My name is Devyn Marsh, and 6 days ago I thought I understood exactly what kind of family I came from. I was wrong about almost everything. My father, Robert Marsh, built Marsh and Sons Construction out of nothing. That's not sentiment talking. I watched him do it. He started with a half-ton truck, a set of tools he bought second-hand from a retiring plumber, and a phone that rang maybe twice a week. By the time I was 12, the phone never stopped. By the time I was 23, the company was pulling in close to $11 million a year in contracts across southern Ontario, with crews working sites from Barrie down to the Niagara region. Dad was the kind of person who remembered every worker's name, every subcontractor's birthday, every detail. He was precise the way only people who came from very little tend to be. Nothing got wasted. Nothing got overlooked. I had worked alongside him since university, not because he asked me to, because I wanted to. I took business administration at McMaster specifically so I could come back and help him scale what he'd built. I handled the books, the procurement contracts, the insurance renewals, the CRA filings that gave him headaches. When we landed the contract to build a community center in Brantford, I was the one who stayed on site for 3 weeks to manage the timeline. I was 26. Dad used to say I had his eye for detail and my mother's ability to make people feel like they mattered. He meant it as the highest compliment he knew how to give. My older brother, on the other hand, had his own definition of involvement. He showed up to the company Christmas lunch every year, shook hands, said the right things, and left before dessert. He'd tried working with Dad twice in his 20s, and both times it ended badly, missed deadlines, a client complaint Dad had to personally resolve, and one incident involving a subcontractor payment that Dad never fully explained to me, but that I could tell had cost him something deeper than money. My brother had eventually moved into real estate, which suited him. It was a world where the optics of confidence mattered more than the substance underneath. He was very good at optics. When Dad was diagnosed with a progressive heart condition 2 years before he died, my brother came home for a weekend, took Dad to lunch, and then drove back to Toronto. I reduced my hours. I took on the role of coordinating his medical appointments, managing his medications, adjusting the company's workflow so that the stress on him was minimal. I'm not listing this to make myself sound like a saint. I'm listing it because it matters to what came next. Dad died on a Tuesday morning in February. He'd been declining for about 6 weeks, and I had taken to sleeping on the pull-out couch in my parents' house so I could be there. He went quietly, the way some people do when they've made peace with things. I held his hand. My brother arrived 4 hours later. The funeral was 4 days after that. My aunt, my father's younger sister, the one who had always been closer to my brother than to me, started making comments at the reception. Small ones at first. Remarks about the house, about whether certain furniture pieces had been promised to certain people, about my father's wishes as she understood them. I noticed, but I was too exhausted and too raw to engage. I assumed there would be a proper reading of the will. I assumed things would become clear. They became clear faster than I expected and not in the way I'd hoped. The morning after the funeral, my brother called a family meeting in the living room of the house I had been caring for my father in for the better part of 2 years. My aunt sat beside him on the couch like she was there as a witness. He was calm, almost pleasant. He said that Dad had updated his will 6 months ago. He said the house and the business had been left to him as the eldest child. He said that there was a sum set aside for me. He used the word sum without specifying what it was, and that he thought it would be best if I found other arrangements for housing as soon as was practical. I asked to see the will. He said the lawyer would be in touch. I asked again. He said he didn't have it with him. My aunt looked at me the way people look at someone who is embarrassing themselves. She said quietly and with that particular kind of compassion that is actually contempt dressed up nicely, that it might be better if I took a few days before asking too many questions. She said grief does strange things to people. Then she said, "Take whatever you can carry and get out. The house belongs to your brother now. You have no claim here." She was paraphrasing my brother's position and making it harsher, which is a thing she had always done for him. She thought it was loyalty. It was something else. So I took my overnight bag, my laptop, the 2 boxes of files I'd brought from the office when Dad started declining, and I left. I drove north on the 400 without a destination, which I had never done in my life. I am a planner. I make lists. I check things twice. Driving without a plan felt like a symptom of something, and maybe it was. I ended up at a motel near Barrie, the kind with exterior corridors and a vending machine that takes coins. I sat on the edge of the bed in my funeral dress and tried to understand what had just happened. My father, who had never once in 31 years given me a reason to doubt his word, had apparently rewritten his will 6 months ago and left everything to my brother. I turned that sentence over and over and it didn't fit. It didn't fit the man I knew. It didn't fit anything he had ever said to me. Not the late nights talking about the business, not the conversation we had when he first got his diagnosis, when he sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "You know this place better than anyone. You'll keep it running the way it should be run." Not the way he looked at me on the days when I solved a problem he hadn't been able to crack. There was a manila envelope in one of my boxes. I found it around midnight when I was going through things without really knowing what I was looking for. My father had handed it to me about 3 weeks before he died, during one of the harder weeks when he was sleeping a lot and speaking slowly. He said it was just paperwork, backup copies of things. He said, "Keep that with you. You're the one who reads the fine print." I hadn't opened it yet. I hadn't had time. Inside were several documents, insurance records, a copy of an old equipment lease, a letter he'd written to me that I couldn't read past the first paragraph without my hands shaking, and a business card with a name written in his handwriting underneath the printed text. Donna Tran and Associates, Estate Law. And below that, in pen, "She knows everything. Call her." I put the card on the nightstand and stared at it until 4 in the morning. At 7, I called. Donna Tran's office was in a low-rise building near Yonge and Eglinton, the kind of office that looks understated on purpose. The receptionist offered me coffee. I said yes and then didn't drink it. I sat in the waiting room for 11 minutes and spent most of that time trying to slow my breathing. When I walked into Donna Tran's office, she was already standing. She reached across the desk and shook my hand before I introduced myself. "Devyn," she said, not a question. "You know who I am," I said. "Your father talked about you quite a bit." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please sit down. There are some things you need to understand." She placed a document on the desk between us. It was a will, my father's will. I could see the signature at the bottom, the date at the top 8 months ago, not 6, and the notary's seal. She turned to the page she wanted and slid it toward me. "Primary beneficiary, Devyn Marsh." I read it twice. I read it a third time. "That's not what my brother told me," I said. "I know," she said. "That's why we're here." She took off her glasses and set them on the desk. "Your father came to me 14 months ago when his health situation became serious. He had concerns about how his estate would be divided and whether certain family members would handle the transition responsibly. He was very deliberate about what he wanted. I asked the question that was pressing against everything. Then how does my brother think he inherited the business?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because your father also created a second document, a conditional trust instrument. Your brother was given what appeared to be a straightforward inheritance, the house, the business, operational control. But it was structured as a temporary grant. It had a single condition attached to it." My stomach dropped before she even finished the sentence. "What condition?" "That he demonstrate, over a minimum period of 30 days, that he was providing appropriate support to you during the bereavement period." Emotional support, housing, financial stability. The language is specific. She pointed to a clause on the second page. Your father wanted to know what your brother would do when there was something to gain and no one watching. The room went very still. My father set a test, I said. Your father was an exceptionally careful man, she said. He loved your brother, but he also knew him, and he had seen enough over the years to have doubts about what your brother would prioritize when real stakes were involved. I thought about the lunch in Toronto, the 4-hour drive after the diagnosis call, the equipment payment incident Dad had never fully explained, all those small data points Dad had been quietly collecting for years. My brother failed it, I said. Within approximately 14 hours of your father's funeral, yes. Her voice was even, professional, but there was something careful in it, something that wasn't quite neutrality. He had your aunt deliver the message. He did not provide housing. He did not contact you afterward. He has not, to my knowledge, asked how you are. I nodded slowly. Something was shifting in me that wasn't grief and wasn't anger exactly. It was more like clarity arriving all at once after a long fog. What happens now? I asked. Now we document the violation. I have been waiting to hear from you. Your father suspected you might not call right away. He said you tend to sit with things before you move. The corner of her mouth moved slightly. He knew you well. What do I need to bring you? Anything that substantiates the breach of condition. Communications, witness accounts, records of your living situation since the funeral. I thought about the texts my brother had sent me. 2 of them, both about logistics, neither asking where I was sleeping or whether I had money for groceries. I thought about the voicemail my aunt left the day after I'd driven away, saying she hoped I was finding clarity. I thought about the fact that not one person in that family had called to ask if I was safe. I have everything you need, I said. It took 5 days to compile and file. In that time, I stayed at the motel, worked remotely for the company, because I still had access, because nobody had thought to revoke it, because my brother had not yet realized that I had been the one keeping the operational systems running, and that without my access codes, payroll for 43 workers would not have gone out on Friday. That was not something I did to be petty. That was something that happened because he had not thought through what inheriting a company actually meant. On the 5th day, Donna Tran called to tell me the documentation was sufficient and the conditional trust had been formally triggered. I asked her what that meant in plain language. She said it meant the estate reverted to the primary will. It meant the house, the business, and the assets were mine. It meant we were ready to notify my brother. We drove to the house together. Donna brought a colleague, a quiet man named Mr. Osei, who handled the formal documents. It was a Thursday afternoon, the end of February, still cold enough that there was ice on the driveway. The same driveway where I'd loaded my boxes into my car a week and a half earlier. My brother answered the door in a company jacket with the Marsh & Sons logo on it. He had already had new ones made. He saw Donna first. His expression shifted. Not much, but enough. He knew who she was because he had contacted her office the day after the funeral, and she had declined to speak with him. He had, apparently, assumed that meant the will was uncontested. "We need to speak with you about your father's estate," Donna said. He stood back and let us in, which surprised me. I had expected more resistance, but people like my brother, I was realizing, tend to believe in their own position until the exact moment the paperwork says otherwise. They don't prepare for the other outcome because they can't fully imagine it. We sat in the living room. Donna laid the documents on the coffee table. She explained the structure of the estate, the primary will, the conditional trust, the condition, the timeline, the breach. She was clear and methodical and gave him every opportunity to follow along. His face went through several things in a short amount of time. Disbelief first, then a fast recalculation, then something that looked almost like anger before it collapsed into something smaller. "That's not legal," he said. "You can't structure a will like that." "You can in Ontario," Donna said calmly. "Conditional gifts are well established in estate law." Your father worked with our firm for over a year to ensure this instrument would hold. He never told me, he wasn't required to. My brother looked at me then, really looked at me. Devyn, come on. We can sort this out between us. Whatever the document says, we can come to an arrangement. Dad would have wanted. Dad wanted you to take care of me, I said quietly. That was the one thing he asked. You had 30 days and you used 4 hours. Something moved across his face that I hadn't seen before. It might have been shame. It was hard to tell. I was overwhelmed, he said. I wasn't thinking clearly. Neither was I said. I was also grieving. I was also overwhelmed. The difference is I didn't put you on the street. He opened his mouth and then closed it. Donna set the formal notice in front of him. She explained that he had 30 days to vacate the property and that all business accounts and access would revert to me effective immediately. She said it the way lawyers say difficult things, without drama, without apology, with a kind of neutral exactness that left no room to argue with the delivery, even if you wanted to argue with the content. My aunt called 3 times that afternoon. I let all 3 go to voicemail. Later, I listened to them. The first was disbelief. The second was anger at Donna Tran specifically. The third was a softer call, asking me to think about what this would do to the family, asking me to consider my brother's children, asking me whether my father would really have wanted this. I thought about that last question more than I expected to. My father had spent 14 months carefully, quietly, deliberately constructing a structure that would answer exactly that question. He had anticipated every objection, including this one. He had gone to a lawyer, he had signed documents, he had notarized them, he had kept copies and given me a card with her name written in his own handwriting because he knew, with the specificity of a man who had built things from nothing for 40 years, that I was the one who would read the fine print. He would have wanted exactly this. I moved back into the house the following weekend. It smelled like his aftershave still, faintly in the hallway near his bedroom. I stood there for a while. There were things I had to do. Payroll, obviously. A site meeting in Brantford the following Tuesday. A conversation with our foreman, Gil, who had texted me twice during the week asking careful questions that told me he had understood the situation better than most. An accountant's appointment to review what my brother had managed to authorize in the 10 days he'd had control. That last one took longer than I expected and turned up some charges I am still dealing with, though that's a separate matter. I also called my brother once about 2 weeks after the documents were filed. He didn't answer. I left a message saying that I had no interest in making his life difficult, that I understood grief had played a role in what happened, but that I also couldn't pretend he hadn't made a choice. I said the door wasn't permanently closed, but that I needed time. I haven't heard back. Here is the thing about my father's plan that I keep returning to. He didn't do it because he hated my brother. He wasn't vindictive. He was precise. He had seen over 30-some years of running a business that the people who prove themselves under pressure are rarely the same people who look the most confident when there is nothing at stake. She had watched my brother make promises he didn't keep. He had watched me show up when it was inconvenient. He drew a conclusion. He built a structure around it. He left me the company not because he felt sorry for me, and not because he was punishing my brother. He left it to me because he had been paying attention for years to who actually did the work. He trusted the record over the performance. My brother thought the inheritance was about who mattered most to my father. He got that wrong, too. It was about who my father believed could be trusted with what he had built. Those aren't the same thing. And the difference is the whole story. The porch light at the front of the house has been flickering for 2 weeks. It's on the list. Dad had a list like that too. Things that could wait until they couldn't anymore. I used to tease him about it. Now I understand it differently. You take care of what matters most first. The light will wait. I take care of what matters most first. That part, at least, I learned from him.